you all. Basically what I want to do today is provide you with an overview of the ISO 9001 certification, where it's come from, so I'm going to give you a bit of history. I'll try not to send you all to sleep with that, and what it looks like today, and then give you some examples of our clients and how they've used it to sort of further their businesses. Firstly, who are we? So, as I said, ISO Quality Services Limited. We are a family-run business. My dad founded the business in 2000. Firstly, he set up over in Ireland, actually, just due to the market being a little bit less buoyant as it was in the UK. So, built up a brand for himself over there, brought it into the UK, into England, sorry, about 3 years after that. And yeah, we're now going strong in Worcester, moved offices about 2 years ago now to expand, and we now also offer training as part of our services as well. So ISO implementation, certification and training. So what is ISO? Has anybody worked with ISO before? Yeah, process management, yeah, yeah, okay.
And quality management systems, yeah.
Brilliant, okay. So I don't want to miss anything out, but at the same time I'm just going to give you a brief sort of overview just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, so it's a systematic and process-driven approach to managing a business, and the main purpose is to support a company in meeting the needs of its customers. It looks to help businesses deliver a consistent level of quality and satisfaction. And has also been proven to make businesses feel more in control of their processes and generally take out any inefficiencies and things like that. It's especially helpful to businesses that are either growing or have experienced a high level growth period. At this point in time, you tend to find businesses let their procedures run out of control, and what we tend to find is people come to us and say, oh, we've grown quite substantially in the last 3 years, we now feel like we're doing things twice, we've got some inefficiencies, and they implement the ISO at that point in time in order to yeah, bring themselves back into order and reduce the inefficiencies. So history-wise, so an overall way to explain the ISO is to exercise control through conformity of process, most importantly to achieve customer satisfaction. So a bit of history on the ISO. It first originated in the defence industry, where they required all companies that worked with the MOD to have formalised standards in place. Basically, in order to work with the MOD, they needed to have documented procedures, and those procedures were then audited by the MOD to make sure that the employees were following them. So that's kind of where it originated from. But it moved out of the military when the UK government set up a campaign, sort of went all around the UK, with quality is everyone's business. So it became sort of less known in the military and started going through into the sort of UK manufacturing market, really. Around the same time, there was an increase in suppliers starting to be assessed by multiple clients. So if they were working with a company, a supplier would go in, and multiple suppliers would audit, multiple customers, sorry, would audit the suppliers. And it started to look as a bit of a waste of time and money, because the same companies were being audited 3 or 4 times by different suppliers, different customers. This led to a government committee recommending that suppliers should have the ability to be assessed against a generic set of requirements. So it kind of introduced the third-party perspective, really, and took the influence away from the customers auditing and actually bringing in that third independent party, and then that one audit would obviously satisfy all the customers. The first quality assurance standard was actually published by BSI in 1971, and it was originally for the electronics industry. And then in 1974, sorry, I'm having to get my dates right, they published the guidelines for quality assurance, which helped transfer this responsibility, and that's kind of when the third-party auditing came out. Meetings were held with industry experts and BSI, and eventually this led to the publication of the BS 5750. A few of you might remember the old BS 5750. It started to be picked up by a lot of industry bodies, and then they basically took it through, agreed with the industry that this was going to now be the new standard. And as soon as it went into industry, that's when it became the 9001, or what's now known as the 9001. The original ISO 9001 was in 1987, and it was very similar in that the standard was most suited to the manufacturing industry, and found that it focused more on the conformity of procedures rather than overall process management. In 1994, they released a new version, and this looked to take the emphasis away from the emphasis of quality assurance by using preventive action rather than it being sort of a look at actual procedures. However, what companies tended to do was still implement it by putting lots of hefty procedures in place, and companies started to become overrun with, procedural manuals. You'd go into offices and you'd have, hundreds of documents. You probably
be using the toilet.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually a standard. It's funny you said it's actually a standard for making a cup of tea. Would you believe? It's actually an ISO standard.
Really?
But yeah, I know. So what they look to do is to take that out and to strip it back. So in 2000 was probably the biggest change from when it was the 5750 and into the version it is now, where they effectively wanted to put process management at the heart of the standard, and making sure that you had a documented system and not a system of documents, because that was the biggest sort of bugbear, I suppose, with the client base, was that we've got all these procedures, but what are they actually doing for us as an organisation? So now it's about actually having a documented system. So that kind of version of it, the 2000 version, has gone through a couple of different changes to what it is now, which is the 2008 version. The principles, they introduced 8 core principles, which I'm going to talk you through, and effectively that's where the standard is now, and it's still in its same shape from when they did the major changes in 2000 to 2008. However, they are revising it again next year, so September 2015, there's going to be a new version, and that is actually going to further align other standards with it. So the ISO 14001 environmental, the 27001, the structures changed slightly, and the 9001 is kind of the last one to catch up. So when that catches up, all the standards will be far more aligned, which means we'll be able to implement them a lot easier into businesses as one full management system.
How about tier 16949?
The one for the automotive industry, yeah, that's like a level above ISO 9001. So
I knew the number, I didn't know
exactly.
Yeah.
It tends to be automotive industries that have that one.
That's where I've worked on it. Yeah.
It's very similar. I mean, the ideas and the concept is the same, but it's actually has a greater level of prescriptiveness within that sort of standard, because obviously of the high level that it works in, whereas 9001 is more flexible and can be applied to different industries and different businesses, whereas that one's very much automotive. Okay, so what does it look like today? So these are the 8 key areas, or the 8 key business principles that the standard looks at. So customer focus, which is the most important, leadership, involvement of people, having a process approach to running the business, ensuring there's management commitments, ensuring there's continual improvement. That's another area that's really, really kind of underpins everything that ISO is about. It's about improving efficiency, time saving, money saving. Allows a business to have a factual approach to decision making, so you're not just making a decision based on a whim. You've actually got your facts and your figures, and everything that's sort of all your evidence. And also looking at the supplier relationship as well. So if you are having issues with a supplier, actually being able to open up that conversation, recording any issues that you have with suppliers, and rather than sort of saying, oh no, I'm not going to work with them anymore, you can actually work with that supplier to try and improve their service delivery if that's what's causing you an issue. So there's a lot of focus on relationships there. So as a bit of a summary, systematic and process-driven approach, supports company to meet customer needs, consistent level of satisfaction. I'm sure you can read all the others. But an underlying principle, which is always a great way to explain it to somebody if they have no idea what it is that an ISO system will say what you do by writing down the procedures, do what you say, so follow those procedures. Don't do something differently to the procedure, change the procedure, not the way you do things. And then the auditing part of it is the proving it. So that's where the certification comes in, that's where the logos come in. Any suppliers say, yeah, they've got proof that they run documented systems. So, what are the requirements? So I've just condensed this down. So obviously there's a lot of different clauses within the standard, but these are the sort of the main things that a business will need to have in place, or when we go to audit, this is what we'll be looking for. So first of all, you need to have a policy. It's kind of your headlining document. It should detail out to your stakeholders, so your customers, your staff, anyone else that's got an interest in the business, what your perception of quality is and how your business decides to implement that. It's then looking at having business objectives, so actually writing down what those objectives are. And those aren't financial objectives, so it's not sort of based on turnover. They should be smart, quality-based objectives. So it could be around achieving a certain satisfaction score from your customers or things like that. Regular meetings, so management review meetings. There's a requirement in the standard to hold a management review meeting at least once a year. We actually suggest 4 times a year because a lot happens in a year. You'd be in there for about 3 days, I think, if anything like our business. So holding them more regularly helps pick up anything, any potential issues or any opportunities, and helps you action them quickly. So although the standard requirement is only 1, like I said, we encourage people to hold 1 a quarter as a minimum. So then the control procedures. So looking at what forms do you use on a daily basis and how are they controlled within the business? How are they identified within the business? How does everybody within an organisation know that you're using the right form? And is it there in the place when you need it at that point in time? Records. Records tend to be completed documents, so a document would be like a template of a training matrix or a supplier questionnaire or something like that. And then obviously once that's completed, that becomes a record. How are those retrieved? Where are they saved? How long do you save them for? When do you get rid of them? How do you get rid of them? All that kind of thing. Making sure that you have a policy in place for that.
And all of that is documented, timelined.
Yeah.
All of that's part of the ISO.
Yeah, exactly. So you would look to say, I mean, whatever your policy is your policy. So you might say that you go down the accountant's route and keep things for a minimum of 7 years. You might decide in your business, for example, if you've got very little sort of paperwork or even computer files, it's still even sort of disposing of those when it's appropriate. You might decide actually no, 2 years is kind of how long we need to keep stuff for, because otherwise businesses just keep acquiring paperwork or filling up their servers and things like that. So it's about sort of clearing the decks when it's appropriate.
15 years.
Yeah, 15 years of paperwork. Yeah.
That's what I've got to keep dates
that's
on site. 15 years.
Yeah. So that's it. Some industries are dictated to.
Yeah.
Other industries they're not, and they have no idea how long they should keep stuff. So they just keep it forever. And you go into companies that have been going like 30, 40 years, and they've got files from 30, 40 years ago. Absolutely panicked about throwing anything away.
It's the creepy crawlies that like to live in those files as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Southern Water was loads of phone calls and messes.
Go down into the basement and.
Thank God they didn't tell us at all.
So then it would be looking at what procedures have you got in your business? What are the business critical procedures? So, you joke the procedure for going to the toilet, making a cup of tea. What you're looking at is what your customer timeline from when they first interact with you right to your sort of aftercare. What are the key steps that have to happen in order for that relationship and for that customer to keep coming back and using you? And those are the kind of the key procedures that we would encourage a business to look at. Once they've been running it a few years, they tend to then just adopt the approach and it spirals out and you get processes for everything. But actually to comply to the ISO, it's just the critical path from start to finish that you need to look at. And how can they be evidenced? How can your procedures be evidence that you are using them and when you're updating them? Changes in IT systems, changes to the way businesses run, going into the cloud, that has a knock-on effect to a business's procedure. So again, don't just try and do a procedure a different way, change the procedure if that happens. Make sure you edit it. They should be live documents, they should be always being reviewed. And then when something goes wrong, the best one in the world, something will always go wrong at one point. How do you prevent that from happening in the future? Businesses will fix things. If they have a customer complaint, it will get fixed, it will get dealt with. But what was the root cause of that complaint, and how can you ensure that it doesn't happen in the future? Is there a gap in your procedures? Is there a gap in training? Could it have been a training issue? So it's about sort of investigating into that and looking for trends. So then you have management commitments. Does the business have sufficient resources available to function effectively? Now that could be like human resources, it could be IT resources, it could be stock. Is management sort of keeping an eye on that and monitoring that? Do businesses have job descriptions in place for their employees? So if they're taking on a new employee, do they understand what their roles and responsibilities are? Are these communicated, and who manages the communication within an organisation, both internally and externally? And can management prove commitment to continual improvement? Like I mentioned earlier, that's a big one. Then looking at your personnel, are they trained to the right level? Have you got training records in place to prove that they're trained to the correct level for the job that they're undertaking? Do you undertake appraisals to make sure that your staff know what's expected of them and what they're working towards? Again, continual improvement. And is the infrastructure fit for purpose, and is the working environment fit for purpose as well? If you're trying to achieve customer satisfaction, but the working environment doesn't adhere itself to that, or you can't find anything because you've got hundreds of papers on your desk and things like that, is that being taken into account, and could there be better ways of running your environment? Service delivery, understanding what your customers want from you, making sure you have works instructions, however whether it's computerised, not just written on the back of the fag packet or whatever. Making sure that they're fully determined, your customer requirements, so that you know from the outset what you're going to deliver is what they actually want. So it could be sign-off sheets or email confirmations, however a business does it. And are there controls in place to ensure that contracts are completed on time? So I'm sure everybody's had an experience where they expected something to happen. Probably buying and selling a house, it's normally the solicitors that hold it up. But
generally.
Yeah, you normally, making sure that you deliver on time, first time, right time, on time to your customers. And again, as I mentioned earlier, working with your suppliers to make sure that they play their part in that service delivery, because you could be doing everything right as a business, but if your supplier delivers your widgets, late, there's nothing you can do. So making sure that you understand what their procedure is and how long it's going to take them, so that you can manage that and manage the expectations of the customer, really. Monitoring, measurement and analysis. So it's all very well doing these things, but you need to also work out whether it's working for you as a business and whether it's actually adding value to the business. So what do your customers think of you? Do you ask your customers what they think of you? Do they use you because there's no one else to use? Do they use you because you're cheap? Do they use you because they just always have and they don't actually know why? But finding that out and actually going to them and asking them what they think of you. How do you deal with complaints? And are they recorded and appropriate actions taken if you get complaints? Going to companies, got one company, I think they employ about 300 people, and we went in there to talk to them about the ISO. We don't get complaints. Yeah, I'm sure you don't.
Not one.
not one single complaint ever. Yeah, exactly. Do you conduct, I mentioned earlier, do you conduct root cause analysis when things go wrong, making sure you get into the actual problem rather than putting a sticky plaster over it and thinking, oh, I hope for the best that doesn't happen again. And then sometimes your staff fix things just because that's what they do, and with nobody writing it down, you don't know that there's an issue. So things can actually happen multiple times, and unless it's actually written down and you see it, actually that happened 6 times in the last month, that could be an potential issue for us. One of the most valuable phrases when looking at monitoring and measuring, we always tell the clients is, measure the valuable, don't value the measurable. Sometimes clients go off and they start measuring everything because they can get this figure, they can get that. And then you sit down with him and you say, well, yeah, brilliant, but what impact's that going to have on your business? Knowing that information, what impact's that going to have? What changes are you going to make? How are you going to improve? And they're like, oh no, it's just, I could get that statistic quite easily off my computer system. So what we tend to say to people is, look, only measure things that are going to add value and add significance to your business. And those might change gradually over time. You might set sort of certain KPIs and then obviously improve or streamline them going forward. Okay, so ISO, we were talking about this earlier actually, ISO is becoming more and more of a requirement. In fact, when the recession hit, everybody used to say to us, oh, I bet you're the first thing that goes when a recession hits because, you know, you're an extra cost and things like that. In actual fact, no, we were the thing that kept those companies getting those contracts. Having the ISO meant that they could tender for public sector contracts. 9001 is on every single public sector contract. It's actually named as a prerequisite. Might not lose you the tender, but it's going to be a bulk of the points. And I was looking at a tender only last week, and 14,001 and 27,001 are appearing on there now. Do you have an environmental policy? Do you have an information security policy, a data handling policy? I was just mentioning earlier, the government have actually backed a scheme called Cyber Essentials, and on the 1st of October, to work with any government organisation, you have to have been through the Cyber Essentials route. It's a self-certification route. It's a very watered-down version of the information security standard, but they're taking it seriously, which is ironic, seeing as they're the worst ones for their data security, leaving things on trains and opening briefcases and whatever. But it can also help reach new markets. The way that business is done now with the internet, your shop window, you know, your web pages is really the first interaction a potential or prospect customer might have with you. And you don't necessarily know what business you're missing by not having it, because they're not going to come and tell you, oh, I looked at your website, but I didn't contact you because you didn't have what that company had. They're just going to not contact you. You know, if you think about how many hits you have on your website versus how many leads you get coming through, there's got to be some reason. There's a general amount of traffic that goes through that maybe hit the wrong pages or whatever, but you know what it's like yourself. If you're looking at two companies and one's got all these certifications and the other one hasn't, even if you don't actually know what they mean, subconsciously you err more towards that sort of organisation. I know I do when I'm internet shopping and buying my shoes and handbags. But also most of our clients do report an increase in turnover due to becoming more efficient, really. So they save costs. You know, it's never our intention to go into an organisation and say, you know, you have to buy any equipment or don't recruit any more staff or anything like that. What we're trying to do is make sure that they are running as streamlined as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean, in actual fact, it has, well, in one example, actually increased headcounts. So because they were getting better as a business, you know, getting more, obtaining more business. So it actually had the opposite effect, really. So I was just going to go through a couple of case studies. I'm going to have to read this out, I'm afraid, because it's a complicated business. You'll probably understand this better than I will. So first company is called Super Systems. They're based in Birmingham. And they're a provider and system integrator of complete process measurement, control and automation products and systems for furnaces and machinery in the heat treatment industry.
That's a mouthful.
Try saying that on a networking event. Yeah, a 60-second pitch. They first came on board with us by implementing 9001 in 2010. They were a fledgling company which had aspirations to grow, and they found that the processes that have been developed have contributed to a 64% in sales. What they felt is, as well as it being a marketing benefit, it gave them the confidence to approach clients like Rolls-Royce and Goodrich Aerospace. You know, small little 3-man company going to Rolls-Royce, knocking on their door and saying, actually, I want to be considered with every other one, you know, 100 staff company that is also competing for the business. So it just gave him confidence. And they've actually used the process approach to diversify and move into different industries as well. So yeah, he completely puts it down to having proper processes and procedures in from about sort of a year 2 into business. And then the second one, ICNet, so a leading healthcare software provider. They came to us and implemented 9001 in 2006. In 2007, they then implemented the 27001 Information Security Management. And when we first met them, they had 5 employees. They now, today, have 35 employees, and their products are available worldwide. And last week, I found out that they've just sold to the owners, just sold the business to an American company for a few million. And like I said, we met them right at the beginning. So they've done really, really well. For them, they found that by having proper systems in place, it allowed them to control their growth whilst also remaining credible in an extremely competitive marketplace. They felt that the industry and the environment that they worked in, they would have been seriously disadvantaged had they not implemented the systems. And the structure that the systems brought them allowed them to grow as quickly as they did. So, that's that.